Welcome to the Chicago Cultural Center and the 15th edition of International Jazz Day. My name is David Gould. I'm the Director of Education and Outreach at the Herbie Hancock Institute. And this year is our 15th inaugural edition of Jazz Day. We're very excited to have you all. And we're even more excited. We are even more excited to have a visionary in the field of jazz, an NEA jazz master, the founder of the Berklee Institute for Gender Studies, multi-Grammy Award winning instrumentalist and drummer extraordinaire, Ms. Terri Lyne Carrington.
All right, thank you. Welcome. We are so excited to be here and to partner with International Jazz Day and the Chicago Cultural Center and the Hancock Institute. This is my, this is the 15th year you just said, so this is my 9th time playing International Jazz Day. So I feel very connected to the Hancock Institute and really excited to partner. We brought students from the Berklee Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice, which I founded about 8 years ago, and one alum. So we're going to do a panel discussion, but I thought first let's just start with some music, because it's always good to do that. And then we'll end with some music as well. But we'll get into some things, we'll talk about some things after they play a couple of tunes. So let me introduce to you on guitar, Mason Bryant. On alto saxophone, Riko Sasaki. On drums, Cameron Spann. On trumpet, Alice Armstrong. And playing bass, she'll actually be on the panel as well. She is an alum of our institute and got her master's degree from Berklee Global Jazz Institute and has a dual degree. When she was in our undergrad program, she was also going to Harvard, so has a dual degree there, and is currently in another program that we do called Next Jazz Legacy, which, if you're interested, I won't go into all that now, but you can look that up online. But it's an apprenticeship and mentorship program. So please welcome Devin Gates on bass. And they're going to play a couple of songs from a book that I put out called New Standards, 101 Lead Sheets by Women Composers, because, you know, I think when we think of standards, we think of a certain canon of music, and of course, most of the composers have been men over the years, so I thought, let's put out a book of songs that could be alternatives and put out in a collection where it's easy to access. So there's 101 lead sheets if anybody's interested in that book. And the two songs that they're going to play right now, the first one is by Patrice Rushen. It's called Shorty's Portion. And the second one is by Alice Coltrane, and it's called Blue Nile. Thanks. Okay, there we are. Thank you to Cameron Spann and Rico Sasaki and Alice Armstrong, Mason Bryant, and Devin Gates. So, and also, you know, I just want to clarify, some people think that our institute is just for women, and obviously that's not true, because gender justice is work for everyone. And one of the great things is that so many male students have applied to be in our institute for various reasons, but it really gives me a lot of hope that this generation, that we're in good hands with this generation, because they're like, yeah, we're down to fight the patriarchy. So, which is great. And speaking of fighting the patriarchy, I'd like to introduce our managing director to our institute at Berklee. She's an ethnomusicologist, and she's been managing the institute from the beginning, so for about 8 years. And she's going to moderate this conversation, and she'll introduce the panelists. But please welcome Asia Burrell-Wood.
Everybody, it is so wonderful to have you all in the room with us, and I'm actually we're going to frame this conversation very soon, but before I do that, I'd like to introduce our amazing panelists. First up, we have Nicole Mitchell, who is an award-winning creative flutist, conceptualist, and composer. Also would like to say, having emerged from Chicago's creative music community in the 90s, she is also the former and first woman president of the Association of the Advancement of Creative Musicians, AACM. Nicole Mitchell. Next up, I would love to welcome to the stage Joel Ross, who is a highly acclaimed jazz vibraphonist, composer, and also, I have to say, one of Chicago's finest. Joel. And as you were just got to hear, Devin Gates, and you are absolutely in for a treat. And so now we are welcoming Devin Gates back up to the stage, bassist vocalist, 2026 Next Jazz Legacy Awardee, and as Terry said, one of our earliest students at the Institute, and now incredible alum, and she's out here thriving, and we're so glad. And now, welcoming to the stage, the amazing Terri Lyne Carrington, and we will all get started.
And I realized I didn't do my full job.
Yes, can I?
Yeah, and
go ahead.
I wanted to just let you know that there's 3 overarching questions that this panel is going to try to address in some way or another in about 45 minutes, which is pretty impossible, but we're going to do something. And those 3 overarching questions are a big part of why I founded this institute, in hopes to making or contribute to making a long-lasting cultural shift in the art form. And those questions are, can we expand upon the existing jazz narratives that are defined by improvisation and collaboration, and that are rooted in long-established cultural and social traditions? 2, can we forge a monumental jazz movement of new distinction that celebrates its heritage, translates current-day culture, and is free from musical and other limitations that can be burdensome to its development? And finally, in what ways can we reframe our ideas of what jazz is to disrupt bias and cultivate a more sustainable, integrated, and fertile arts community?
Thank you. So we have our leading questions. I did want to start by giving a little bit of framework and also how we got here, which has been, I think, a pretty wonderful journey and ride. But just a few weeks ago, we were we were able to produce a wonderful event in partnership with Dr. Regine Jean-Charles at Northeastern University. And she had been organizing for several years the Bell Hooks Symposium at her university. And in working with her, we wanted to curate a discussion in connection with Bell Hooks' work, but also that centers jazz, Black music, intersectionality, and Black feminist thought. So that conversation was more surrounding Black feminist soundscapes. And you might have, some of you, or I hope many of you, looking in the title, it might feel a little bit familiar, and of course that's on purpose. One of Bell Hooks' works, which is her publication, We Real Cool, Black Men and Masculinity, and I kind of was looking back at that. And in that title, well, that title in itself is a reference, which you might also recognize. It's in a direct reference to poet Gwendolyn Brooks, also lifelong Chicago resident, and her 1959 poem, which is also celebrated as an example of jazz poetry. And then just kind of thinking about that and what our goals were, I was just thinking about, well, I mean, just the concept of cool is interesting, especially as it is related to jazz, and we'll get into that. Yes. But I also was thinking, again, in our intersectional lens, what about, is she real cool? You know, and how often is the status of coolness conferred towards or upon women, even though we know we have histories full of, and even today, cool women who are she real cool, or anyone that identifies as she. And we wanted to pack that in the lens of jazz, Black feminist thought, Black cultural expressions. So we're really glad to be here today to do so. And so with that, I'd love to also share with you, She Real Cool is an ongoing series, an ongoing initiative dedicated to reframing ideas surrounding jazz, practice, and promoting objectives that disrupt bias, expand the form, and include adjacent methodologies or disciplines. So we are all about this art form, everyone on the stage, and I know everyone here in this room today, or we wouldn't be here. Wouldn't be here at all. So let's get into it. Okay. So I have a few questions that I just want to begin with. So I'm going to actually begin here with Terri. And in considering this conversation that we're looking to shape today, I want to know from you, Terri, what has been gained through the institutionalization of jazz education, but also what might you believe has been flattened, erased, or excluded? Oh, but actually, before we get there, I'm so sorry. I want to go further than that. Let's start with the title. When you hear, this could be for everybody, but Terri, you can start us off. When you hear the phrase, "she real cool," what does it mean to you in relationship to the jazz practice today? And Terri, if you can start us off.
Okay, we'll make this brief since we'll go down the line, so to say. But first, can I ask the sound personnel to put our microphones a little bit in these front wedges because it's hard for me to hear Asia.
Oh, okay.
All these years of playing drums, my high end is shot, so I'm struggling. Okay, yeah, so when I think of She Real Cool in a jazz context, I think about women that have defied what expectations have been put on her, defied social norms, cultural norms to play jazz in the first place, and entered into a space that hasn't exactly been welcoming. So to me, growing up, oh, thank you, I can hear now. Growing up as a little girl playing jazz in pretty much all male space, I wasn't thinking about it that way, of course, because I was a kid. But now that I'm not a kid, and I see young people all the time and young women that decide to step into that space, I do think that it's quite cool. I think it's courageous, actually, because you're entering into a space that basically says that you shouldn't be here. You know, I even wrote a piece a couple of years ago that said, everything I see, even after 4 Grammy Awards, everything I see says I shouldn't be here. And my very existence feels like a miracle. So that's what I think about when I see She Real Cool in the context of jazz, and to make it even cooler for young women to decide to step into that space.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. When you were talking, I was thinking about your piece because it served as like a real just moment of resonance for me. I remember the first time hearing you talk about it. I mean, before I got to Berklee's Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice, I always felt like the only one in whatever scenario. Growing up playing in Atlanta, and even going to school across the river at Harvard, it was just a completely different space to be able to go to Berklee, be taught by Linda O on my instrument, to be in an ensemble where not only was I not the only one anymore, but it was actually, my first ensemble was for women. So there were no dudes, which was unheard of. I was in there, I was like, and the space felt completely different at the time. And I think there's a level of, I remember hearing Esperanza talk about this in an interview, of just feeling like there were already so many barriers and walls that you had to put up, and sort of hiding your interiority as like a protective mechanism, and also feeling the need to really prove yourself, more so than the need to even express your own authentic self, which is what we're all trying to do in jazz. But just those internal voices, the imposter syndrome can be so loud sometimes that it's hard to even get there to that true inner voice. And so when I think about She Real Cool, I think about people I look up to in the jazz world, like Terri, like Nicole, like all of you, you know what I mean? But also writers like Bell Hooks and Gwendolyn Brooks, and Audre Lorde, people who were unafraid to express themselves and go inward. When I think of cool, I think of being grounded and being inwardly clear, in the world with really intense external pressures.
think of what She Real Cool means from my perspective and vantage point. I have been inspired, I think, by everything that you all are already talking about, but meeting minds and musicians like Miss Mitchell here, who was my first teacher in high school. But you know, anyone who I met who wasn't, you know, presenting like me, who had to deal with things that I didn't have to, who wanted to be there and express themselves in the music and still have to, you know, deal with ignorance, deal with sometimes hatred. Every friend and everybody who I met who I'm trying not to like get dark on it, but it's like I feel responsible to call out my friends, my peers who aren't paying attention, who aren't doing everything they can to like make everyone feel comfortable and feel accepted to be in the space. I recognize that there is a feeling of ownership in a lot of spaces from male musicians and from non-musicians, but people who are in these spaces who don't allow everyone to feel safe, I think. And so when I meet all of my female and female presenting peers who are in these spaces just trying to be, I think, just being themselves and trying to contribute the way that they want to be there, I'm inspired, and you know, I think that's cool, you know.
It is cool. Cool.
The merging of bell hooks with jazz is very personal for me in my own journey, because I left California roller skating around playing Mozart, deciding I wanted to be a jazz musician, started playing on the street, and then decided to change schools and go to Oberlin. And I was in the first class of jazz students of the very beginning of the jazz program, and the only woman in the program, which was very difficult because for many reasons, the flute being a big part of it too. Like, what is the flute? What are you gonna do with the flute? You need to play saxophone. Oh, that was even more prevalent than the woman thing, but bell hooks was there. And Gloria Watkins, became a personal, mentor. She cared that much about her students. And she understood what I was going through in the jazz program, being the only one there, and a lot of the teasing and the I would say negligence that was happening, where you're just trying to survive, but no one's really looking out for you or encouraging you. And she was definitely an incredibly generous, encouraging person. And she even talked to Wendell Logan and was like, look, you need to, make more space for her to do stuff. And, so that was wow, putting that together. The first thing I thought when you gave us the questions was Black feminism is one of the most important ingredients in making this happen. And who better to express that than the work of bell hooks, so I think She Real Cool is her being herself and not even aware of how cool she really is, and no one even paying attention to it. But then at some point, your description, Terry, of you're just there doing it. And then at some point there's kind of the self-awareness, and then you're able to give to others because you realize that you've been, you know, in some ways a leader doing this, you know, in all of our roles, like doing this, you know. And then for me as the first woman of the ACM, the first woman president of the ACM, there was not a lot of women in the ACM when I came in. Actually, just had a conversation with one of my mentors, Maya, who brought me into the ACM, and that when I was in, that made 5.
Out of how many? Around.
I can't even count how many members, but we've definitely seen progress. And now Renee Baker is the 3rd woman president right now. So
Hey,
that's
that is
fantastic. I think that needs,
Yes.
yeah. So yes, She Real Cool is like inherent and essential to jazz, you know, because also gets going back to the origins of the music. It started with the voice, and it started with the embellishment in the way, you know, the voice sings in gospel music, and who does that more than a black woman? So it goes back to that. So She Real Cool.
Thank you. Thank you for that thoughtful, everybody's real thoughtful response. And actually, Nicole, since you're there, because you already shared a bit about your journey in your answer, and I'm wondering, in that journey, in the way that jazz has shaped also the way that you think about expansion versus tradition. You were kind of going there. So from your journey, how has that shaped the way you think about expansion versus tradition in the art form, both within and without music? And then actually, Joel, I'll have that same question for you as well.
Expansion, we talk about discipline, bringing other disciplines. I think jazz has always invited dance, poetry, and, you know, theoretical ideas, cultural theory, you know, ways of seeing and being, and which is what makes jazz expansive. Innovation is a word that I really like hang my hat on a lot, like that, you know, the music moves forward when you bring your full self and bring your voice, and you honor the tradition and you reframe it, you know. So I think there's a relationship that's undividable, you know, between tradition and expansion. And if we only understood that, maybe we stop arguing about, well, I don't know about this new stuff. We need to just stick with the old stuff, because we need all of it.
I agree. Honestly, I think the tradition of this art form is built on the innovation and expansion. It's always been connected to other parts. It's not just the standing on stage and playing the instrument. But really, it's what I think gets lost and forgotten is that it's based on lived experiences in like cultures and neighborhoods and people's lives. I find when we're in school now and students are learning the standards and whatever they need to for their juries, and they're learning this music without learning what it meant to the person who wrote it or played it, when and where they were performing, why, how it's a privilege now to be able to get a gig and, you know, play for a bunch of people, but this is how people were trying to pay their bills, or the musicians that they, you know, love to listen to were like getting odd jobs and like driving taxis or working at the grocery store or whatever. So it's all a part of the lived experience. And so when you're considering people's lives and you have to consider the different facets of people's lives. And when you're open to learning about the world, that's naturally gonna, you know, come out in the art that you're doing or whatever you choose to do. I tell a lot of students now, the person that you are is the player that you are. So if you're open to learning, just living life and getting out of the practice room and going and meeting people and understanding other lived experiences, then I think a natural innovation will come from what you learn and how you interpret that through the lens of your art. And so in the sense of expansion, I think the more people are empathetic to other points of view and other lived experiences, then it will naturally translate, and there will be less focus on, well, this needs to stay like this because this is the tradition. Nah, you need to go ahead and talk to somebody else and understand what they're doing, and maybe that can inform you and what you choose to do.
Thank you. And I love that you're bringing up the idea of, the person that you are, the player that you are, and also life and lived experiences, which then kind of brings me to my next question. And this is actually, I would love if Terri and Devin can approach this in terms of daily practice, right? And so jazz as an art form, as a music, is often, defined by improvisation and collaboration, of course. But how does that show up? Like, what does that, or those words, improvisation and collaboration, actually look like in your daily practice?
Well, I think if you're a creative person, you're going to be creative no matter what you're doing. So I feel like I'm creative every day, which is why it's hard for me to stick to a schedule. It's hard for me to, do things kind of in that cookie cutter daily life type of way. But that skill really worked out well for me during the pandemic because I was able to quickly pivot to doing other creative things where I could still work, during the pandemic without performing. Even the way you cook, the way you dress, all of it is improvisation and creativity. Yeah. And collaboration, I mean, that's what our society should be based on. If we're thinking about the collective opposed to the individual, then that's collaboration at its finest. And there's, we live in a capitalist society, which makes it very difficult to think that way because we've been, I don't know, it's been ingrained in us to just keep acquiring, to go out there and get it, and to kind of push that aside and really, think about collaboration and collective work and collective experiences and prioritize that is not always the easiest thing. I always, and there's also barriers, for us in that way. Going back to the gender conversation, I always wanted to be in a band and never got invited to be in a band. So I therefore had to start my own band. I got invited to play with band leaders, don't get me wrong, but I never got invited to collaborate in a band with anyone. Not even a duo, really, you know what I mean? So I started this band, Social Science, really for that purpose. I tried to start one before that, and it didn't. I tried a few times, actually, now that I think about it, and none of them worked out. But it really pointed to the fact that sometimes with women, we have to create our own experience that we want. And when I look back, most everything that I've done, though I've had support and help along the way, it's really been me creating the experience that I wanted to have. So if I'm doing that with the success that I've had, I really have to look at, people that are just starting out and see how difficult it is for them to actually be able to collaborate and be invited into spaces. So that's kind of my take on it. But I also was thinking about expansion. I'm kind of jumping ahead of you a little bit, but I'm on a roll. You guys were just talking about expansion, and I was thinking about how we expand as a community. Not just of course with gender, but with genre and with styles and all these things that are happening now that are kind of hybrids of various styles, and letting all this different music that we grew up with, or music that we feel is social music, and how we let that integrate in our serious music. I'm seeing a lot more of that. When I really started touring and all that in the 80s, it wasn't quite as much of that. And when it did happen, it felt watered down. It felt, like, smooth jazz, and there was some great fusion, but then it got even, I don't know, got kind of watered down. So I think, when record companies started to fail and independent music became the thing, and everybody had to, put their own music out, not wait for somebody to say you can record, not wait for somebody to give you permission to be creative, then we started, seeing all this other music kind of seep into our jazz. So I think that's, independent artists, independent, music became the most important thing to create this fertile ground that we have now. But when I think about expansion, and I keep going back in my brain to, looking at the roster of who's about to play at the Vanguard or the Blue Note. But I use the Vanguard as an example because it's such a historic and important jazz venue. And at any given time, when I look at their roster, I rarely see one woman. You can, look at it, and you can look for months. I think I checked it for 3 or 4 months, coming up. And maybe, I don't remember exactly when, because I don't want you to go look and say, oh, no, there's a woman. But I looked for months and didn't see any women at all. So, it becomes a question of, not just, of course, the musicians have to think differently about the expansion of this art form, which is why I wanted Joel to be on this panel, because you hire women, and I've always commended you for that, and I'm starting to see more musicians hiring women, but it's too bad that you stand out like I won't say a sore thumb, but you stand out because it shouldn't be that way, and these presenters have to start thinking differently. And you have to take risks. And some presenters maybe aren't in a position to take risks, because I'll play a venue someplace in the middle of the country probably. And, when I was touring New Standards, and, it wasn't, maybe the venue wasn't full, and I would feel bad about that, But then I came to the realization that when you're doing gender equity work or racial equity work, it's not always going to just fall in line with a sold-out show or a certain kind of success that that's been defined with within the patriarchal structures that we're dealing with. So I had to start thinking, people do have to. Maybe you won't sell as many tickets, but you have to start doing this work and not look for things to be the same. And it's the same thing with jazz education. I remember going to the University of North Texas, and there were no women in the 1 o'clock band and the 2 o'clock band, or any African Americans. And I walked around the campus, and there were plenty of women and plenty of African Americans. So I'm saying, what's wrong with this picture? And I actually kind of felt for the band director, because he's trying to keep his gig. And he said that, that he's under a lot of pressure for them to keep winning awards, because that's what makes, people want to come to that school and be in the music department, because they're like the top big band. And so by top, that means, you got to hit those notes and the high notes a certain way, and it's got to have. And so I realized there's a kind of a masculinity attached to some of these bands and some of these departments that they keep replicating and keep looking to replicate, because they want to win awards, or because their bosses are telling them this is what we need to be the top band. So you have to start looking at potential in people that haven't had as much access, and I think that that's part of the problem when we talk about expansion, and where can we expand outside of just the artists, but also presenters and these educational institutions, having to start to think differently and be prepared to do more work. Because when when you're looking at auditions and things like that, if you just go for what shows up at the top, it's not always the cream that rises to the top, sometimes that's not what happens, and you have to, keep looking and really engage more. And when you're used to doing things a certain way, and you're not really trying to take on more responsibility, then this is where it leaves us.
Thank you. Devin, is anything coming up for you in that as well? Our connection.
Yeah, I mean, so many things. I'm thinking more on like a micro level or an everyday level. Having just finished school recently, coming out of one of these jazz institutions, a very progressive one at that. It's very interesting going back into the real world and just remembering that I've been in a bit of a bubble for a while, and the world is not the Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice, and there will not be gender balance in the ensemble.
Working towards it. Working towards it.
Right, yeah. It can be, and I feel very grateful, even more so, for having opportunities to get to play with Nicole and getting to play with Terri and be in spaces. So I know what it can feel like. And I can try my best to sort of reverse engineer that, just starting out, emerging, trying to do my own band leading, trying to work on my own music, or when I have opportunities to put together bills, for example, for whatever DIY, basement house show. Who am I picking? Like, am I going to worry about who maybe is going to bring the most audience, or who just had a show at, the Jazz Gallery or whatever, or maybe I'm going to go for somebody who, like, I've been seeing a lot, like maybe as a side person who hasn't been able to, like, do a band leading thing yet, or, maybe somebody that I see that comes out to a lot of shows that I know plays, but, hasn't really gotten asked to sit in, or just like, hasn't really been invited into the community in that way. So I've been trying to think on a micro level about, these great models that I've had the privilege really of getting to spend time in and share space with, of what leadership looks like in championing inclusivity in these spaces, because I feel like when I graduated, I was kind of like, oh, well, I'm sure, like, it seems like we kind of solved it. Like, we got gender balance, like, we're talking about Black feminism everywhere. Like, there's all this cool stuff happening. Like, wow, like, I don't even really have anything to add. Like, I feel like, this is great. We're just going to ride off into the sunset, and it's going to be awesome. And then just being like, oh, okay. There's work. And, yeah, just thinking about even in whatever, house party in Bushwick or something, how I can sort of try to bring a little bit of that in there. Because, yeah, I forget that not everybody had bell hooks, in their college experience. Or even, yeah, being a liberal arts major, getting to read this stuff and talk about it for assignments. Mm-hmm. And that also being like a barrier, for sure. Talking about intersectionality, talking about these concepts that I feel are so basic to the way that I think about things, but then also, like, I got that word from a book, that I got assigned to read. So,
I mean, I love that you say that. Like, oh my, the world isn't the Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice, and you have experienced, right, having that, being in the institute, and also now as you have been just boldly carving your own path out there. So let's think about institutions and institutionalization. And earlier, when my nerves got ahead of me, I started here, but I wanted us to get here, so now we are here. And of course, this comes up a lot in thinking about jazz in as an art form, but also in jazz education, right? And earlier on in the art form, where would you go? How would you gain access to jazz education historically versus now, right? Where you can go to schools and colleges and major in jazz and have these kind of programs. That's not exactly, the history of it, right? And so I'm wondering, and Terri, as the founder and artistic director of the Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice, which has certainly been a strategic intervention right, if you will, in terms of jazz education and the genre itself. But what do you feel has been gained? Oops, about to lose my paper. But what do you feel like has been gained or maybe lost through the institutionalization of jazz education overall? Or is something been flattened, erased, excluded, right? What are we gaining and what are we losing in that process?
Well, I mean, I think the institutionalization of jazz has definitely, both things have happened in some way. I mean, there's, these systems of how to learn, so people are getting information quicker. It doesn't mean it's better, but it's quicker. I'm grateful. When I went to college, I learned, because I, wrote songs by ear, and now I had to know what I was doing. And so, I think there's, importance to that. But I really like these institute models, like the Hancock Institute, formerly the Thelonious Monk Institute, the Global Jazz Institute that Danilo runs, our institute, because I think we're bringing the kind of mentorship as best we can into the classroom, so to say. I mean, hopefully it doesn't even feel like a classroom. It's kind of the way that we were taught, by the people that we played with. And I think that that's a great model if you can, if you have that kind of budget, to bring a lot of guest artists in. And I think that adds to, the kind of fundamental knowledge that, jazz programs can provide. It adds a different lens, one that's important. And when you don't have that lens, it's evident, you can tell, you can hear it, you can feel it. Like, Joel was really kind of just saying that. So yeah, I think that it also comes down to who has access, because there's a lot of summer programs and programs that you have to have resources to get into. And so, like I run a 5-week program at Berklee in the summer, and people audition from all over the world. And if you're going, just by, the kind of merit system of, how you're rated to get into these programs, people rate people on, their ability to read, their technique, their speed, their, ability to play in time. And but even playing in time doesn't mean that it feels good. They don't have a system to evaluate how well somebody plays the blues, or how well somebody, feels in time, or any of those things. So it becomes quite academic. So for me, that's the downside. And then, of course, as as this goes on, and people with access, there are, people that never get an opportunity to even, develop in this form. I mean, maybe go do something else. So there's tons of talented people that we've never heard. And also there's tons of talented women that we've never heard because they weren't getting access through, say, the middle school programs and the high school programs. And instruments are gendered, so, they're giving you no shade, Nicole, but they're giving you a flute right away, and and they're not giving you drumsticks right away. I mean, maybe it's changed some, but when I was, what I can see. Piano's always been acceptable. So these are things, that make it so that young women even don't have fun, and why should I do this and be surrounded by young men, and I'm not having fun, and I'm not getting attention. So then the talent part almost is secondary. And then, if you're dealing with just who has access, it can create a, racial, you don't have racial equity with who's studying and then who becomes teachers. It's just there's so many. So many threads to this. I've served on, and I always cite this as an example, I served on the board of the Recording Academy, and I asked to serve on their Black Music Collective. And a guy who was in charge of it, who was a vice president of a major label in hip hop, he said, "Oh, I always thought of jazz as being more white," and was asking me why I wanted to serve in the Black Music Collective. And that's when it hit me real hard. That's when I realized,
Lost the plot.
yeah, I mean, he also probably felt that way about the blues, because he's a young guy and, looking at the only music seemed Black to him was hip hop and R&B. But he's just looking at, what he sees at festivals without really knowing, the history. And I think that's problematic. So, yeah, I think these educational institutions have contributed to that, and they're not teaching responsibly often, history.
And I see you, actually, Nicole, I see you energetically, picking up on in terms of what Terri has been sharing, and are you relating to that in any way?
Well, I would say, and Joel, again, is a product of this, is the Jazz Institute of Chicago. Is another institute that, we're right here, and, of course, they're part of helping organize today, but I definitely want to give some, some hand claps for them, because they do have a really great youth program that has given young people opportunities to grow in the music. And also that has been something, because of Chicago Public Schools, some of them do have music programs still, then there's the ability for the students to rise up through that and then get on to some professional experience. And Joel can talk better about that, because he actually did it when he was in high school. But I was, at one time, worked for the Jazz Institute as an education and community coordinator. That was the title. And so we, having these programs in the parks all throughout the city, and me coming in as a young artist and emerging artist in Chicago, the Jazz Institute definitely provided opportunities for me to perform. And that I think that part of it, like Devin talking about, okay, I'm out of school, now what? Like, how do I get the next leg up? Which the Jazz Legacy, the New Legacy project that Terri Lyne is shepherding is really powerful for that. I've seen like young people come through that and be on tour with major artists, and really their careers take off. And we definitely need to look at that piece of it too. And so there are some really important roles that these institutions can play in providing those, open doors and windows, like to grow. Just being right here in the cultural center, like me as an emerging artist, having like the opportunity to perform the noon concert series, like, like on a regular basis, like, these types of things are really important for emerging artists, so that when they get out of school, they actually can grow. And then when they have their album come out and they get all these amazing reviews, that doesn't always translate into work. Right. So there's still a lot of pieces in the puzzle that are, because there's so much, I would say, turbulence in the music industry right now, especially with the independent labels, so many of them folding. It's another part of it that we have to look at for institutionalization. But yes, access is huge. I was definitely blessed to go to a high school that had a music program that saved my life, actually. Because if I didn't have music, I don't know what I would have done, So, and I know that that's the story for a lot of young students, that the music is all they have, and then there's all these schools that don't have anything, and, that's how hip hop was born.
Truly.
You got the creativity and you got the LPs, and that's what happened. But, but access is especially in our times today. There's a lot of talent out there that, and a lack of opportunity for that talent to have a doorway to walk through.
Right. I'm hearing in these responses, like those themes of access, equity. We do say often at the Institute, Jazz and Gender Justice, talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And so definitely institutions can can address that while also, Terri, as you were noting, that there's been barriers to entry as well, and sometimes lack of accessibility. And I'm wondering, and now Devin, you've been now entering the classrooms as an educator, right? In this season of your life, and so from practical terms of in the classroom within the walls of these institutes, now as an educator, what does it mean to teach jazz through a lens of intersectionality, and also many of the things that have been important to you, Black feminist thought, and now as in your role at this point?
Yeah, I just started teaching at the new school, music technology, teach logic. And yeah, I feel like a lot of the things I'm thinking about are, one, context, always thinking about the context of even just like what music I'm sharing with them, who are the types of artists that I'm sharing with them, is that as diverse as I believe that the music ecosystem really is? Am I getting to know their interest in actually, teaching them what they are interested in and what they want to learn and what feels useful to them, as opposed to like what maybe in the past has been, the standard or, thought to be correct. And just in general, really trying to get to know each of my students. I feel like that's something that I really benefited a lot from, was, the difference between maybe like knowing a student's name or like knowing where they're from, and really getting a grasp of like, what are they doing outside of the classroom? What does their artistic practice look like? I feel really grateful that a lot of my teachers really looked at me, even while I was a student, as a potential collaborator. And I really think that mindset gives the student a lot of agency and a sense of responsibility, and really lights a fire under them. Whereas like maybe sometimes, especially in the way institutions are working right now, I feel like a lot of people can just fall through the cracks otherwise. So I'm really thinking about how personally, after this class, what are they leaving with that's really going to be practical, that's going to help them, whether it's knowledge, whether it's a connection with someone else, whether it's thinking about, okay, this person is really interested in this, let me see if like I can put them in touch with this person later on, whether or not it pans out, but it's just really trying to take an interest, and also listen for who is maybe quieter, or isn't that person that's answering all the questions and showing up. Not assuming that people aren't, showing up in that typical A student way because they don't care or they don't want to be there. Yeah, so I think really trying to make the personal political in that way.
Awesome, thank you. I now want to just pivot to thinking about gender and representation and how the power and dynamics come up in this other area, which is on the industry side, the music business side, or just in your professional life, on the bandstand, wherever that all of these areas of the music making professionally happens. And so in terms of hiring practices, we know that this is another place of inequity, right? Hiring, pay gaps, and each of you are in positions, of course, to be hired, but to also hire. And so I want to start with Joel, as a person who hires for women and gender expansive artists, right, as well. As this is something that you were touching on earlier. What barriers do you think persist, and what strategies do you have you used to navigate or disrupt them? And then also, if anybody else wants to weigh in on that, please feel free to.
Barriers that persist are usually closed-mindedness, and
From who?
a lot of these little boys who are still running around in school playing. But on the business side and in the industry, like being on tour and like sound people not thinking that a woman knows what she may need out of her monitor or equipment or something that happens. A close friend of mine, Kanoa Mendenhall, who plays bass in my band, she brings her own preamp and she'll like a mic, and very often she'll express wanting to use that equipment, and someone will be like, no, I don't, you can't, I don't think we should use that, I don't think it sounds good. And now I do balance between Kanoa fighting for herself, but also I'm like, nah, she said what she needs, like, she knows what she's doing. She's a professional, she's been doing this as long as we all have, like, so just finding those moments to speak up when I'm real big on not doing it if it's not warranted. But I think that's a big barrier. Also, in my having started to teach more often, and I think the mentorship thing is also really important in that I do a lot of one-on-one lessons. And with the young men that I talk to, I just encourage them to pay more attention to the counterparts in the scene. Like, we can very much make it a boys' club if we only focus on that, but like, there are so many other people out there, and I think there is a tendency to view the music through a lens of masculinity, and like, if you're not playing this way, then it's not good enough. It's not, and like,
Equating excellence to masculinity.
yeah. And an important memory I had was I was in New York, and a friend of mine, Maria Grand, had hired me for a gig, and it was with Ganavia Doraiswamy and Rajna Swaminathan. And we got to the new school to rehearse, and we're checking in with each other. How's everybody doing? How you been? And before we like started rehearsing the music, they were like, let's sit down for a second and let's talk. Right. And Maria first just explained what the music was about, and everyone was like expressing themselves and what they thought about the topic of the music and everything. And for me, it might seem trivial, but for me, I was like, man, I don't never do that with none of my guys. We don't never just sit and talk and just like see how everyone's feeling about it and what we think and how to contribute to it. And I'm like, yeah, this has to change. And so that was a big thing. I don't know. For me, it was a big thing to include that in as many spaces as I am able to. And now I have a platform, and I have a bit of privilege that allows me to play a lot in different venues and book bands. And if I'm not using my main ensemble, then I almost always, and even in that band, but I take every opportunity to hire people who don't have access to these gigs and to these opportunities. I help book a small club in Brooklyn called Seeds that is very much open to innovation and trying out new things, and I take it. At this point, I always try to work with somebody who I haven't before. I always try to keep my ear to the ground and just pay attention to the many different perspectives that are out here. I'm saying that's the way I'm fighting barriers.
That's the way you approach it. Yeah. Anyone have a response? Also?
Yeah, and I know we're out of time,
Yep.
and I want to let the students close us out with one more piece. But I just want to respond, because what Joel just said was really key. There's a masculinity or a hyper-masculinity in the music, and so the women that have been successful are the women that can perform masculinity. And this is the thing that has to stop, because what you're doing with that is expecting women to assimilate. And we don't like that, when it comes to other areas, race and other things. We feel, why should we assimilate, right? So it's the same thing, with playing jazz. And, I used to teach that way. So it also creates, I think, a problem with teaching, because you're teaching, just hit harder, just play it stronger, just be, a little more forceful, dig in, all the things that we've been taught. And I'm not saying that that sounds bad. I'm saying that there's got to be space for another sound aesthetic. Femininity has to be welcomed, not just from a guy playing a nice ballad, but actually really welcomed. And I think we don't. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and I think the music won't reach its greatest potential until that happens. And it's difficult because we are so in love with the sound of jazz. I'm in love with it, but it's difficult. It's even hard for me because, I have some students that I've taught that way, and, over the years I've listened back, they've gone on and done their thing, and I'll listen to one of their records, and it'll still have that thing that shows me why I was saying, but then I listened to it and I said, but there's nothing wrong with this. You know what I mean? There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I'm the one that has to start thinking differently, and allowing somebody to be themselves and not assimilate like I have had to. I mean, I'm wondering what has been squashed in my own playing because I've had to be as good as the next guy. I've had to be better, stronger in some ways. I'm like, damn, can I back off? Can I can I just touch this differently? But I've had to hit hard my whole life. So I'm wondering, if that pressure, or I didn't feel this pressure, but I'm wondering if that expectation wasn't there, and that's not what I saw move my career forward, what may have happened, what I might have sounded like if I had had that freedom to find another part of me to express. So I think that that's a big thing. And the last thing I want to say on that related is when a lot of male friends of mine have said over the years, I'll hire a woman if she can play. And people that have hired me. And so now the question, or the conversation with them is basically what I just said. We have to start thinking about it differently, because it's not if she can play based on your standard that has been created and sustained by men. It's like opening up to possibly another sound aesthetic in the music.
Thank you. Thank you. And so with that, one last thing short, because I know we are running short on time. But yeah, I just want, if anybody has any last thought that they want to share. If not, it's okay. But so with that, I will say thank you to all of our panelists. If you can join me in Terri Lyne Carrington, Devin Gates, Joel Ross, and Nicole Mitchell. Yep. Please know that this is collective work. This is just a starter of a conversation that we are looking to carry on, but nothing can change if nothing changes. And so we invite you to be doing that work with us together and continue to be in conversation. And thank you so much for joining us today. And we will go right back to where we began, to the music.
Where are they? Oh, there they are. Okay. Yeah, I think you guys can come up, and I think they'll play a song written by Marilyn Crispell called Rounds. I think that'll be a nice way to end.